Canada and Australia follow remarkably similar paths. We've built on the enduring strengths which we inherited from our European ancestors, added the common experience of multicultural immigrant nations, and sought to achieve reconciliation with our First Peoples. Of course, Canada and Australia have also borrowed and adapted the traditions and institutions of British government and American federalism, as the Leader of the Opposition noted. I can't help but notice, however, that you've done a much better job than us with at least one of our Westminster institutions, the Upper House. As one, I see there's division of opinion on that. As one Canadian political scientist I know likes to say, when we look at Australia, we suffer from Senate envy. Because in Canada, senators remain appointed, not elected. They don't have to retire until age 75, and may warm their seats for as much as 45 years. So by the nature of the system, they're not accountable to voters. So it's a rare pleasure for me to be among senators who are elected by the people that they represent. The mandate to govern, when it is given directly by the people, is a great honor and a great responsibility. It's the very essence of responsible government, and it is the minimum condition of 21st century democracy. And Canadians understand that our Senate, as it stands today, must either change or, like the old upper houses of our provinces, vanish. We have much to offer others. We are stable, prosperous, peaceful democracies. We are free, open, pluralistic societies. At home, we share an overriding belief in giving all of our citizens a fair go. That's why we have a large and growing middle class to which hundreds of millions of people in the developing world aspire to belong. Abroad, we're committed to free and fair trade, helping those in need, and defending global security. We have fought and sacrificed for just causes, but we have neither the capacity nor the will to conquer or to dominate. We are fast friends of, but fiercely proud of our differences with our other strategic cousin, the United States. In sum, our two countries genuinely aspire to the highest ideals of civilization, however imperfectly we sometimes achieve them. For all these reasons, I believe Canada and Australia are uniquely able to serve as a force for positive change in this troubled world. And we should commit ourselves to the service of that cause together. I do not suggest or embrace this duty lightly. It is guided in part, as Prime Minister Howard mentioned, by the somber anniversary that we're marking today. September 11th, 2001 was truly a day that shook the world. 6 years on, the horrific images from that morning still evoke anger, sorrow, and as intended, terror. The buildings may have been American, but the targets were every one of us. Every country and every person who chooses tolerance over hatred, pluralism over extremism, democracy over tyranny. We have been struck again and again in London, Madrid, India, and many other places, including, of course, Bali. Canadians mourned your losses, and we redoubled our efforts to stand with you. Because 24 of our citizens died in New York on 9/11, and 70 Canadian soldiers and one of our diplomats have fallen in Afghanistan, as well as a Canadian carpenter, murdered by the Taliban after he built a school for the children of a remote Afghan village. So both our countries have been bloodied by terror, and both of us are doing our part to confront and to defeat it. Both of our countries are committed to working together. As Prime Minister Howard said in his address to our Parliament last year, and I quote, "Not only for the betterment of Australia and Canada, but for the betterment of all the peoples of the world. This cause is noble and necessary. Because as 9/11 showed, if we abandon our fellow human beings to lives of poverty, brutality, and ignorance. In today's global village, their misery will eventually and inevitably become our own. And friends, we should not underestimate either our capacity to influence events or to influence others. At enormous human and financial cost, we have both built solid reputations as defenders of freedom, democracy, and human rights. We've worked closely to build multilateral institutions and establish international law. Our peacekeepers and peacemakers have saved countless millions from war and devastation. Our aid programs and relief workers have helped poor countries across the globe improve the lives of their citizens. And our histories have set an inspiring example that is symbolized by this great institution. As the Leader of the Opposition said, this Parliament, like our own, enjoys a continuous democratic tradition rarely equaled in the history of the world, unbroken by tyranny or conquest, unbroken by civil war or social disorder. What an extraordinary achievement that is. We were buffeted by the same forces of economic depression, social unrest, and political tension that drove other countries over the brink to political authoritarianism, economic collapse, and much worse. So why not us? I leave it to historians to debate the details. For me, two strengths clearly shine above all of the rest: our democratic spirit and our devotion to equality of opportunity. Democracy is more than free elections, as essential as those are. It is a conviction, a habit of mind, an instinctive sense of fairness, self-restraint, and compromise. Our democratic spirit gives us the confidence to meet new challenges and to strike out in new directions. Equality of opportunity springs from the same principles. It's about removing the roadblocks that prevent others from getting ahead in life, creating economic conditions that reward hard work, providing a safety net and access to social services, and keeping taxes low and fair for everybody. In recent years, both of our economies have enjoyed very strong growth. I know that Australia has been on a prosperous roll for a decade. I just urge you, as I urge my countrymen, to never think that that happened by accident. It had everything to do with prudent policy choices, far-sighted leadership, and careful fiscal management. I believe that one of the great dangers facing both of our countries today is complacency about our economy. Complacency because many of our citizens have long forgotten or have never experienced economic recession. But we cannot take this prosperity for granted. We face unprecedented new competition from emerging economic giants like China and India. It's more difficult than ever to make the right and sometimes very difficult policy choices, because the wrong choices could unravel our progress and prosperity more quickly than many people would care to believe. And the world needs us to continue to serve as powerful models of prosperous and compassionate societies, independent yet open to the world. That is the Canadian way and the Australian way. I've heard a suggestion for a new metaphor to describe the relationship between our two countries. That metaphor is bookends, spaced well apart, but holding together a vast store of knowledge and expertise and experience, not just for ourselves, but for all of those who aspire to share it. But perhaps the comparison to family, in my view, is still the best one. So as proof, let me conclude with a somewhat amusing anecdote from one of my predecessors, Lester Pearson. In the 1940s, he was a young diplomat in Ottawa, and one day he found himself with your Prime Minister, J.B. Chifley, the young Princess Elizabeth, and her infant son, Charles. At the time, Canada-Australia relations were, I gather, in a somewhat strained condition. So when Pearson wrote of the encounter in his diary, he said the following, and I quote, "I hope that relations were not further disturbed by the fact that I was able to make the baby laugh while Chifley was not." Ladies and gentlemen, that sounds very much like family to me. I want to thank you once again for the wonderful opportunity to address you, to share this close relationship that we have as countries. Merci beaucoup, and God bless both of our great nations.